Hi, ma'am. Are you ready?
I am.
Perfect. So I'm excited to announce our keynote speaker or introduce our keynote speaker, Major General Andree Carter, the commander of U.S. Army Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command Airborne at Fort Liberty. And she's taken that role since July 13th of 24. So just coming up on her 1 year in that role. She began her military career in ROTC at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and commissioned through Columbus State in Columbus, Georgia in 1995 as a quartermaster officer, where she spent about 13 years in quartermaster supporting operations in Bosnia, Iraq, as well as logistics observer controller trainer at Fort Liberty. She then went on to become a psychological operations officer in 2008, serving at UCKPOC, and then looking at tactical operations, the 13th Psychological Operations Battalion in Minnesota, the commander of the 319th Psychological Operations Company in supporting operations in Afghanistan, as well as plans officer, the 16th Psychological Operations Battalion plans officer, as well as the G357 of the Chief of the Army Reserve at Belvoir. And then finally the commander of TUPOG prior to coming into the UCKPOC space at the headquarters, and then the 350th KCOM. So without further ado, obviously that's a whole host of experience in both the PSYOP side as well as the CA space. So obviously a natural fit for coming on to command UCKPOC. And so without further ado, ma'am, I'm going to turn it over to you for any further introductions you'd like to highlight, as well as listening to your words. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation. And I was very excited to take part in this roundtable. And what I'll do, I'll provide some updates on what's going on in general with UCKPOC and what would be of interest here in this venue. And then I actually, the dialogue that's been happening since the beginning of today has been quite refreshing. And so I actually have an additional topic that I would like to bring up, more like uh, just a challenge that I'm facing, and then open it up for dialogue if we have time. I just have a 40-minute block. So I'll just start off with some updates. So the Army Reserve CAFDU. Right now, it's currently on hold. It's on staffing hold. So it's DEMO FM is considering for it to continue staffing it either around October, November of this year. The reason why is because the Army is going through a big change right now. The arch truck is about to come out, but it's being worked. And a lot of changes are happening quickly. And so they would like to just hold off on it. We'll wait for that dust to settle. And perhaps based upon how the Army is going to look, it may have to return back to rework it to fit the way the Army will look, or it will continue as is. But we are working to keep it there where it's at so that we can get it through. So my second point I'd like to bring up on and an update, speaking of major changes. So civil affairs as an airborne capability. We have gone through Army-wide. There's been a significant reduction in paid parachute positions, and UCKPOC is one of the organizations that received a big hit. And we start off with 1,823 paid parachute positions, and we've been reduced down to 245 positions, and that's 87% decrement. And the whole idea, really, what was the reason for where that number came from is 5 CA companies and 5 PSYOP detachments, and that's a 245 positions. And so based on our analysis, what I have, what's being pushed up now, and it's up at FORCECOM for decision, is offering 1 CA battalion and 1 PSYOP company on an airborne status, which will bring it down to not 5 CA. And the reason why it's 5 CA companies, 5 site detachments, is one CA company, one site detachment for each rearm cycle, or what was known. It's similar to Arfrigen for our gray beers out there. But in order to have proper oversight while we're in a training status, we just can't have 5 CA companies and 5 PSYOP detachments. That's literally, we were at 245, and that was uh, it was a non-negotiable number. So 245, and that was exactly 5 CA companies, 5 PSYOP detachments. We have to have oversight capability for the airborne capability at echelon. So, and also to ensure we have unity of effort and to keep command and control, I'm offering up as a recommendation of, which is now FORCECOM, 1 CA battalion and 1 PSYOP company. So that'll be 4 CA companies and 3 PSYOP detachments. And then with oversight paid parachute positions included, that will be 245 positions. So that is right now at FORCECOM for decision. So more to follow on that. I'm waiting for that approval, and then we'll move forward with what battalion, which PSYOP company that'll be for to move forward. That is going to be in effect FY26. And so that just demonstrates how quickly the Army is changing. So now that we're waiting for the R-Struct to come out, that doesn't mean as how it's been, where an R-Struct comes out and okay, IOC, FOC are years out. What's happening is we as an Army, as a whole, we will be experiencing a lot of cuts throughout in the Army, and it'll be quickly. And so the R-Struct is, there's a lot of angst on waiting for this R-Struct to come out. And so that's why the CAFDU is on hold, because it will be a totally different looking Army, and very quickly. Let's see. And then I would like to provide an update on the 38 Gulf program. So currently I have put a hold on recruiting for 38 Gulfs. The reason why is because we have had a great success in recruiting. In fact, exceeded expectations on exceeding the goal on recruiting 38 Gulfs. Now that we have people that are awaiting to become 38 Gulfs, what we found is it's a very long timeline. And right now we have 141 people waiting to become 38 Gulfs. That's already been recruited. And it's been a very slow and long process, and we're finding some issues with some contracts that are putting folks in peril to actually be separated from the Army. For example, time and grade. So with the equivalent of a PhD and all of the education experience that they're bringing on board to be direct commissioned, there has been agreements to have them have more time and grade. But what that has done is, because of the long timeline on waiting for a direct commissioning course and then onward to BOLIC B, they're up against the 24-month timeline to go to Captain's Career Course to move onward. So a lot of them are in promotion peril before they're even a 38 Gulf, before they even join. And so we are cleaning that up in collaboration with TRADOC and USARC G1 to shorten that timeline, and we're gaining headway on that. One of which, with the right now, the Captain's Career Course, they're going through the Civil Affairs Captain Career Course. We're working on, instead of phase 1 and 2, seek a means to have 38 Gulfs just have phase 1, and then have phase 2 as an equivalent. They don't need that portion of it to shorten that timeline. Right now, Bullock B is with AMED, simply because one, they're the most accommodating. Two, it's the shortest Bullock B available in the Army, aside from AG and Finance, which we do not have the ability to get seats with Finance or AG Bullock B. So right now it's AMED. So we're working with AMED Center of Excellence, which has they have been very accommodating on helping us shorten that timeline as well. So right now the focus right now is to shorten that timeline and get the 141 folks that right now is stuck in the pipeline, to get them through before we recruit more people. Because right now we're encountering, understandably so, personnel who are frustrated with the timeline and waiting for what they have signed up for. So we do not want to. We want to stop that bleeding. So that's what we're doing now at 38 Golf Program. So before I move on to my question that and for dialogue, are there any questions with those three updates that I have so far?
And there's one question in the chat. The benefit of the CA FDU 26 is it doubles the doctrinal size of the CA team and offers a significantly more robust analytical capacity at higher echelon. I posit it would be beneficial to the force now, irrespective of the R-struck. Do you have any comment for that?
I've been fighting that, and it's not going to move. Yeah, it's not going to move. Also, what's also in question is it's more than just getting it through for the structure. So the structure does have second lieutenant billets and requires a Bullock, and so that is also and that will cost money. And of course, and we have identified billets that will be bill pairs to be the instructors, and we have come up with an internal solution in the event they ask for that to happen. But that is not even, they don't even want, that's not up for discussion because it costs money. Because even if we offer up billets, it still requires money. And the fact that we're offering up billets, and it will be a zero sum because we're offering up billets because it'll be a large, for example, the larger CA teams or what have you. So it will, the billets that we have identified internally to accommodate the new CA Army Reserve FDU is right now we're placing it on the shelf. There is no appetite to even discuss this at the highest level right now, because the way concurrently, I'll have to say that with the CAFDU, with this FDU, it has an inform and influence cell. And there's a lot of discussion on the information force as well, a very robust discussion on the information forces. And as we all know, civil affairs is an information force, along with other, formerly known as information related capabilities, IRC. So now we're information forces. And there's discussion on it being a CMF on its own, and create a CMF for information forces, and that would suck in the PSYOP, CA, public affairs, and what have you, and be part of that CMF. So that's under discussion. That's just one COA of what's occurring with the information forces OPT, and a lot of that is coming from the CSA, who wants to streamline. Of course, we're all going through a very fiscally constrained environment right now, and General George is seeking how to streamline and to make our Army leaner. And so he had there's a hard look on the functional areas. and functional area 30, information operations, the functional area for public affairs, what have you. And so that's where all the information forces idea has come up. And that's another reason why the civil affairs FDU is on hold. So there are a number of reasons for the way it looks right now that we'll have to see how it could fit into what the Army is going to look like. And so, and how that'll look like, I am not privy to it. And even I would have signed an NDA, wouldn't be able to share it. But right now it's on hold. So, and I acknowledge, I've been really pushing to get this through. But there's no appetite for it to continue moving. Thank you for that question.
Ma'am, if we can shift your gears a little bit to back to the 38 golf. There was a
Mhm.
question on the upcoming board that is scheduled for this summer. Given the pause you described, is that going to pause that board, and are we going to not assess? Because the concern was with all the glut of pre-commissioned high-skilled personnel who want to assess, they've been frustrated with their inability to do so. So is that going to totally pause, or are we going to continue with this board?
We're going to continue with this board. We're going to continue because there are people that they provided their packets, and so the packets that have been received are still going to be boarded.
So we're
We
just not
can't.
receiving new packets.
Right, because we really have to clean up the pipeline for 38 golfs right now.
That was all the questions in the chat so far, ma'am.
Okay. So a question I'd like to pose for the team is, so the challenge I face with everything going on with upcoming cuts, and just it almost feels like I don't want to, like a food fight, really, on saving structure, and so I'm faced with the challenge of greater Army. So we in our communities, we know where civil affairs, how important civil affairs is in phases 2 and 3. The Army at large, DOD at large, sees civil affairs as very, very important in phase 4. And that's it. And I'm fighting against, and the way we're demonstrating that we are important in phases 2 and 3 are the war fighters, are the CTCs, the JRTC, NTCs, JMRC, and we're doing really well with that. And there's no question on our capability being important in phases 2 and 3. But at the DoD at large sees civil affairs as phase 4, and also a capability that has been built in response to the coin fight. And so I would like to just kind of throw that out there on folks that's on the panel, to see how it looks from their perspective and their view on that aspect. It seems to be a fight that is, I call it a fight because I really want to save our structure. It's very important to keep it. We built it in this way. And it took a while. And I strongly believe that we need it. But see, we as a community know that. At large, it is not known. And that is something that I'm working really hard at my level to ensure that they just keep us the way we are. But I would like to throw it out for dialogue.
Does anyone have some initial thoughts on the question? Al, I saw your mute go off.
Yeah, this is Al Augustin. I was the G9 for 5th Corps. I'm retired now. I was active duty.
Okay.
The point that you just made, the one thing that you might be able to look at, I would argue that CA is important 0 through 5. And being ready before the bang is important, but also with what you mentioned, the warfighter specifically, ma'am, the piece that you might be able to sell is that CA, if it is important in any realm, is important to the war fighter, and specifically supporting those war fighters. And how you do that is by staffing and supporting corps level fights, division level fights, and brigade level fights. Active duty CA is not able to do that. All right. Nate Newman, Lieutenant Colonel Newman, can discuss that at a USHRAF level and how that's going to impact things. But as far as being able to do the planning that you would need to do, the war plans that need to get supported before you even get onto the ground and start fighting, and supporting all these activities is a key piece that I would offer might be something that you would be able to fill the role in. Now, there's a huge cost to that, as far as much like how CA on the active duty side is going to have super groups, aligning your KCOMs to all the GCCs around the world and supporting them in some manner would be something that I would suggest it might be something you can do. Over.
Yeah, and at the senior leader discussions, what the nexus, and thank you, I appreciate that, and I'll take note of that. Is, and I agree, it's 0 through 5. Right now, the desire is to seek a nexus on lethality. And as they're looking into this R-struck. And so they're really focusing on phases 2 and 3 on making decisions on structures within the Army.
So
Yeah.
if people could raise their hand, I'm playing the professor side of my brain for watching the mics go off, but I know Colonel Kylser, you're next, and then I've got JP Lasedri after that.
Hey, Al, so I saw your question in the chat, and I know you brought up here again, just to kind of bring a little context to what you're suggesting there. I will say 353 is all over that, right? We are fully integrated at the corps level of the warfighter, as well as at the division battalion. We uniquely, this coming year, the coupling of the warfighter with Austere Challenge and CPXF, it allows 353 to do exactly what you're saying, right? And so that was my comment earlier when I said I'm not concerned about our ability, my comment of saying that we're doing well. I will say by the end of this FY, we'll have a DA validated event showing how well we are integrated at the corps level from Compo 3, recognizing that Compo 1 cannot do that. And we've taken that challenge on, and we're running with it, and we're doing an amazing job with the team that you've heard from some of the speakers there that have taken on that effort. Ma'am, I will say, to address your question a little bit, I will say, from my perspective, I'll say the biggest concern I've had, and I've heard him say that on 3 occasions now. Lieutenant General Harder says, he has said in his own words, hey, CA, I don't understand what you guys are. It's kind of have a hole in my swing, right? And that was quite, I guess, concerning to hear that our most senior representative of the CAR doesn't quite understand what we do and how we integrate. And so, ma'am, just posing out there that potentially, I think it's our responsibility to get him that information and to close up his swing a little bit, because I think it'll make it that more effective of selling our 0 through 5 phase, particular phase 2 and 3 of LISCO, of how we integrate and support the overall fight.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. And thank you for, I am confident you're going to do well in this warfighter. And for the greater group, that's what we've been doing, is we've been syncing our CPXF, our standing CPXF, which were used with role players, and we've been white carding everything and synchronize it with a warfighter. We've been doing that for the last 2 years. And really the challenge is that making sure our the request for forces and the request for our capability for the warfighters that we're actually requested. And that's why I would like to demonstrate with the warfighter, and so that and a lot of it too is, and it was discussed earlier in the dialogue, is measures of effectiveness. And a lot of it is there, commanders wanting to see a quick They want a tangible return out of it, and we can't do that with civil affairs, but we have to be able to illustrate the measurement of effectiveness, even if it's out there, but something that's tangible for them to see, something to brief, something to, and so that there has been a challenge. I think if we can get through that and have a tangible measurement of effectiveness of civil affairs, or that the capability and what they're doing on ground in support of the commander's objectives would be is key. And so that's when the war fighter is going to be very important. And to your point with the car, yes, we have done a briefing. We have provided a capability brief for them. And so, and for the car to not really be aware of the civil affairs capability, we have provided that to him. I do believe that with him, even Lieutenant General Daniels, right, prior to General Harder, she is civil affairs qualified. And so we didn't have that with her, with it being a hole in her swing, but it's still outside of Army Reserve, outside of use of KPOC. Let's just say General Harder becomes very, he now knows, he's informed what civil affairs and SAP is. But aside from that, even before General Harder, it's been outside of the CAR and use KPOC that has a clear understanding of what it is that civil affairs and PSYOP can do for them as a lethal means. And so that's where influence comes into play. And that is the challenge right now, is the nexus to lethality. And I'm desperately wanting to save structure. And so that's what we're doing, is demonstrating, and I've been verbally doing it within the senior leader levels on explaining exactly why we're so important in phases 2 and 3. Oh, I see a lot of hands. Go ahead, Caroline, I'll let you.
So, ma'am, I'm actually going to take one written one that ties into what you just said, and also an extra comment in there. So Doug Jordan had mentioned the challenges the J5 planners at the Joint Staff and Commands not properly writing CA into their plans, as well as the engagements of the allies and partners. So I think it just goes to more to the point you just said. I know my time at UC URAF, same thing, where we were having to, how can we integrate into both the exercises as well as the O plans? And I think that's always an important piece of making sure that we've got person at the table, and that we're actually making our relevance with the actions that we're doing. So with that, I'm gonna move over to JP, and then Chris Holchek is not able to use his hand, so he'll go next, and then Nate Newman.
Hey, good morning from Los Angeles, ma'am. I'm JP Lissetter over here. So kind of interested in a lot of what you said. In terms of the warfighters, I 100% agree. That is where we show them what we can do. I do think that what I've seen, to kind of capitalize on your point, is it's the idea that we need to be present in between the warfighters. We're not just there at execution, but actually that last little comment, I think, is really salient, the war plans, in that we don't want to be somebody that the Corps call on, because they feel like they need to check that block during the warfighters, but rather it's something that they feel like they can't do phase 2 or phase 3 without. And something that I've spoken to a lot of the leaders at my level on in Korea and otherwise is, if you're playing war without CA, you're operating in a kind of fanciful, like non-reality. So I think a lot of that, from my level, where it's not that we're just assuming that our active duty counterparts who are not CA understand, like, this big shift we did about five or so years ago, where we're really thinking about phase 2 and phase 3. At 358, we're not really training phase 4 at all, because that's not what the demand signal has been at all. But we can expect our active duty counterparts, especially on the common arms side, to understand that. One of a recent conversation regarding measures of effectiveness and performance I had with the division commander was, I understand my measures of performance. It's putting essentially, kind of crudely, putting bullets in brains versus CA. How do you measure putting ideas in brains? That's not really something that is very easy to do. So I think it's a very interesting discussion, something we definitely need to focus on.
Yeah, thank you. And really the to ensure that we are not on the chopping block, it really is the Army that needs to understand it, because those decisions are Army. So we have combatant commanders. We understand where civil affairs and the need is really there, right? We have Indo-PACOM, we have UCOM, UCRAF, CETAF, using civil affairs and wanting and needing, the demand is there outside of Army. But when when it's the decisions to be made, the hard decisions in this fiscally constrained environment, and with the new priorities in the defense strategy, is in the NDS, is the challenges. And I agree with absolutely, that we are needed, and the structure should not and should be left alone. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can't just, start getting some chemical companies and do shake and bake CA anymore. I mean, we just can't do that anymore. We have the structure, leave alone. But the Army is making a hard decisions based upon DOD's priorities. And so, yeah, and that's my response to that, and I'm not countering it. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but it is reality. It is the challenge I'm facing right now. And I want to save structure. And that's where and that's me wanting to give you all situational awareness of what the atmosphere is like right now. As the R-struck is, as the palm offsites are happening right now.
It's Chris Holschek, you're up next. Chris, you just muted and unmuted yourself.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me, General?
You're good to go.
Yes. Yeah.
It is wonderful to see you, ma'am.
Thank
I just wanted to bring to your attention something that actually Hugh Van Roosen, in his great wisdom, put us on when we were, in fact, running our symposium at Fort Bragg back in December of 23. And Dennis Cahill and I have been working on this. And you have it now as a resource. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but it's a narrative strategy for civil affairs. What we wanted to be able to do is we didn't want to create talking points. We wanted to create a narrative strategy. So we had one of the foremost experts in the world on narrative strategy come and talk to us at last year's roundtable, and help us guide us through this process. And Dennis and I, with a great deal of work with many other people, put together something that we see as kind of a work in progress. But it's something that kind of helps to bring together that argument around three main questions. One, what is civil affairs? Two, what does it do? Three, why is it important? And it addresses this to many audiences, but we certainly had combatant commanders and maneuver commanders very much in mind when we put this together. So there are three deliverables that we posted on our website under the tab telling the civil affairs story. One is a full briefing with briefing notes. One is the actual paper that explains the narrative strategy, and the third is a two-page handout that explains civil affairs and the Civil Affairs Association. If Dennis wants to join me in making any further remarks, please do so, Dennis. But the advantage that we have is because we're a .org and not a .mil, we could work with, but also outside. So we don't have to sort of slavishly quote doctrine. We can actually put it in more or less common sense terms to people, because we're trying to talk to members of Congress as much as we're trying to talk to commanders, military commanders. So I commend that to you as a resource. We would very much appreciate it. Our annual cycle on this is throughout the year. Whatever comments you've got to us that can make it better, we're happy to entertain those. And then Dennis and I will do the revisions in December and January and roll them out for everyone to use as a resource as they're trying to explain to people the answers to these questions. What is civil affairs? What does it do? And why is it important?
Oh, great. Yeah, I would love to provide feedback on that.
And ma'am, I just put the link is in the chat for any of the commanders or anybody else that's trying to figure out how to answer that question. It also goes with one of the comments that David Levia put on about branding, which is obviously always a concern, and both at the big Army level, but also within CA. Of his recommendation was rename the division to Lethal Information Strike Force. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Colonel Newman.
Thank you, ma'am. Major General Carter. Just circling back to Al Augustine's point about the reliance on Compo 3 civil affairs, especially at these Service Component Command headquarters. In the case of USARAF, we have a 17-person civil affairs division. We fall under the G3. Only 3 of those positions are Compo 1. One of them has never been filled in the last, I think, 2.5, almost 3 years now. And the other 2, of course, are being R-struck. So that means the entirety of civil affairs at a 4-star headquarters is Compo 3. It's USACAPOC. And the bulk of those are an FTN that rotates every 9 months. Now we have 5 ADOS positions, but it can be tough to hold down an ADOS position for longer than a year because, of course, they're unaccompanied tours. And we're really looking for an 04 to an 05. Probably they have families. They can only stay for so long. Now, we have an excellent relationship with the G35, with the G5 plans. We're called in a lot for planning. We have to do, Annex K and Annex Whiskey updates and rewrites and so forth. So we're there, but think of it in the sense that in 9 months, it's going to be somebody new. So it's really hard to kind of build on that and follow through when you're a rotational force of every 9 months. And that's coming from, again, USACAPOC. And without that, they'd have none of those capabilities, to be honest. So it's better that than nothing, but that's still a limitation for a lot of these Army headquarters. We're talking theater level, CMO and CAO planning. We're talking about writing as a land component command for NATO and Annex Whiskey. So we have to count a lot on our NATO partners at JFC Brunsum or Landcom and so forth. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And General Braga and I actually met on that because of the Compo 1 reductions already in the past R-struck. We've identified the need for a multi-compo collaboration per se. But we are working on more multi-compo solutions to really get after that. Now, right now, the collaboration with the is really in the training side of the house. What you're speaking of is what we're faced against are the reserve access to reserve component, the mobilization policies, and what have you. And so the FTN, the 9-month rotation, is really the best way to ensure that Compo 3 is on ground. And then there's tour duty, of course, but then there's funding, and as we know, funding, whether it's going to be the requester paying for it and or the Army Reserve, it's dwindling down, and funding really is going to be the key for it. When it comes to the requester and funding, 12304 Bravo is the best way to access involuntarily, but have to be palmed and planned by the requester and be part of their budget. And so we're faced with those roadblocks when it comes to having someone there full time. Having an AGR billet there is not in the cards right now. In fact, the best way to have civil affairs there full time AGR is to have them part of the AREC. But having an AGR billet to fulfill a joint requirement is not in General Harder's appetite right now. But I do acknowledge the challenge there. I do I do agree. I mean, the 9-month rotation is tough, which is the reason why it was so difficult with GWAT is our constant rotations. But thank you very much for your comments. Thank you.
So, ma'am, I know we have about 1 minute left, but I hope you'll entertain one last question from General Horton.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hey, I know I'll try to be brief, but I'll tell you really quickly what I'm seeing from a perspective in Indo-PACOM. The 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star commanders that I deal with on a regular basis do see a ton of value in civil affairs. We are fully engaged in what we're doing out there. The problem is that as they go into their core warfighters or their division warfighters, they have very specific training objectives that they're trying to get after. And it's really focused on multi-domain effects, on long-range fires, on things like that. And so they're not really building out the civil environment, and they're trying to really get after those things, those concepts and emerging doctrine that they need to use for the next fight. So it's not that we're getting relegated. They're still using us, but in a very limited capacity because they have very specific things that they're trying to get after. I think where we're doing this very well, and if all these folks want to be around late tonight for the 351 and Indo-PACOM session, we're going to talk about what we're doing in Korea, because I think what we do in FS and in UFS with regards to multi-domain targeting and civil affairs and engagement in the LISCO fight, I think we're cracking the nut there. And I think you'll see that as we talk through that this afternoon or this evening. But that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that these 3-star, 4-star, 2-star commanders have very limited time. They have limited funding to get after what we think is important, so they can get after some very specific training objectives that they're trying to do. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't think it's an issue really of not understanding civil affairs or appreciating civil affairs. I think that they've got some other things they're trying to get after.
Yeah.
Or,
Thanks,
I
Brian.
defer my time to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think we really have we definitely have the opportunity to hang our hat on being a part of the influence, being an influence force. That really is where I'm bringing forward to senior leaders on how important we are in influence. We civil affairs, because that will affect what's happening on ground, on lethal means, on what they want to do in war fighters. But yeah, thanks, Brian. Hey, Ferd.
Hey, ma'am, how you doing?
Good.
Caroline, can you give me just 1 second?
It's all her time, sir.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I want to show you one picture and then I'll be quiet. I got to share my screen. I can do it, right, Caroline?
Yes, you can.
Okay, give me 1 second. This is how I see it. And this, when people ask me about civil affairs and phases, this is something a little bit crude, if you can see that.
We can.
Okay, so I think this is easy if you kind of think of phases as being on the y-axis instead of the x-axis, right? And so I think this is the picture I carry with me all the time in my head, and that is that phase 4 tasks almost always exist, particularly after a unit crosses the FIBA or the FLOT. Let's use Korea as an example. Our model always says that we're going to attack and go north and we're going to be successful. And then I say that the consolidation zone and the wake of combat operations are phase 4 tasks. So the phase 3 tasks, and this little picture I kind of drew here real quick, is phase 3 is still the main effort. There's no doubt about it. And when you get to phase 2, when you get to phase 3, those tasks are still the main effort for the lead elements that are working their way north towards Pyongyang. And that's what I'm trying to show. Phase 3 is up there. The commander and the staff are oriented on phase 3. There's no two ways about it. But what is in the wake of phase 3? And I say phase 4 tasks start at the limit of the maximum effective range of the enemy's artillery, right? Now, why did I pick that? Because once you hit the max effective range of the enemy artillery, the people on the ground are going to think the war is over, right? So that that band, I think you can calculate, right? So you can say, here's a corps with its fighting brigades, and you can draw a line from the FLOT back behind it. And I say you can start drawing where phase 4 is becoming the main effort, where people are walking around asking, who's going to be the police? Who's going to do government? How are we getting the lights back on? Where's food? Where's the clinic? Where the school's opening? That stuff. So what I'm trying to say here is on D+30, if you use something like a Korean scenario, right? If the lead elements of the Corps are already 30 or 40 kilometers into North Korea, I'm saying there's probably 10 or 20 kilometers of ground that is expecting us to respond to phase 4 environment. And as this keeps on going, I could have put another one in here saying, here's phase 5, so I could take this one, and say, pull it all the way back here and say, that's actually phase 5, where we've also already transitioned, control to the indigenous people, or in the case of Korea, to the South Koreans. So for me, I never have a problem. You say, you want to know how much CA you need in LISCO? You need a crap load, because as the Corps is successful, because we never briefed that we're unsuccessful, as the Corps is successful, you have this ever enlarging phase 4 tasks on your hands, and commander doesn't want to be distracted by it. So I did a crude, picture here where I would just say here, even in phase 1, the main effort can still be the arrival of forces and conventional forces, right? I'm sorry, phase 1 can be the CA and PSYOP, shaping the battle, shaping an area, right? But when you get to phase 2, now it shifts to conventional forces. And I would say in phase 2, you have a huge amount of CA still working. Korea is another good example of saying, who's working with the Koreans to make sure the locks stay open. There's no trouble on the FOB or assembly area borders and stuff like that. And then when you get to phase 3, nobody wants to talk about CA because actually the brigades are fighting, right? But the bottom line is, in order to protect the consolidation zone in the rear areas, you have to have CA so that the routes stay open for sustainment operations. You got to have local support to make sure that malign actors don't have access to, rear areas and stuff like that. And I would say, as you get further along into phase 4, now all of a sudden, yep, you know what? You probably have a wonderful transition if things have been working out well. The definition of well being that you handled phase 4 tasks in phase 3 well, you're in a position to actually give up those phase 3 tasks. The Corps goes home and CA guys stay, and it's kind of, it's a little bit crude, but you're basically now doing phase 4 tasks, right?
Yeah.
So for me, this is the picture you have to tell people about. If you say this, I think, because I mean, your contemporaries all know that they're going to have a big, giant phase 4 problem on their hands. I mean, the failure of U.S. campaigns in the last 30 years have been, we didn't figure that out. We had a mess on our hands, and I think this is the picture. And I would tell any of my buddies, hey, you can fight your ass off and I'm going to be quiet, but I know I've got a huge, ever expanding phase 4 requirement. And you're not talking to me right now because you don't want to get distracted from the main effort. But what I do right now, 2 or 3 kilometers north of the DMZ, is going to resonate through everywhere when they find out, yep, we handled the farmers well, we reestablished communications, kids went back to school. That happens on D+2. I mean, if you imagine a campaign as a holistic problem, on D+2, D+10, you are putting schools back online. And my model is you can actually have the artillery move and draw that line behind the FLOT, and where phase 4 tasks begin. So thank you, man. That's what I wanted to show.
Thanks, sir. Ma'am, I know we're almost 10 minutes over your time, so I appreciate you spending the extra time. I know there's a hand raised, but I don't know if you have that flexibility to take that last question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ferd. Yeah, and I want that drawing.
I'll get it to you.
Come on. Yes, that is brilliant. Thanks, Ferd.
You bet.
Michael.
Good morning, good afternoon, ma'am, team. I think that the general's question is about how do we tie to lethality. I think we're all competent in talking about CA's value over time, and of course the value to the cores to consolidate gains. But if the question is about lethality, because that's what the JROC cares about, as they're palming this at the Joint Staff, I would suggest that CA's connection to sensing and targeting is a way to begin the discussion in a way that those involved with the POM can hear it, so that later we can make the argument about how CA helps with consolidation of gains. But to get through this juncture for funding, the idea of lethality, ever since Secretary Mattis, has been the primary issue for gaining funding at the POM cycle. So CA can provide value in terms of sensing so that we can have better targeting. And when we target our enemies and understand their influence on the civil environment, is where we can best make an argument to keep funding for civil affairs now to make these larger long-term arguments later. Over.
Thank you, Michael. That's right on target.
Yes, ma'am. This is what JSOC does, and they have no problems getting funding. So if we want to use a model within the Army that has proven success in getting funding, that's where they make their money, ma'am.
Yep, thank you.
So, ma'am, I know we've gone way over your timeline, so I do appreciate the additional few minutes, but I'll leave it for you for any closing comments you might have.
So first of all, I'd like to close my portion by saying, and I'll stay on the entire time and I'll be on and off. But I will keep this, I will remain on here. I'll be here this evening. And I'll miss some of yours, Brian Horton, on the Indo-PACOM discussion, but I would like to thank you for inviting me to take part in this. And in closing, I'd like to say that I have a strong appreciation for civil affairs. And when I assumed command of USACAPOC, I'm sure there has been some angst on the fact that I am not a civil affairs officer. I am not civil affairs qualified by institution, but I certainly feel like I'm qualified based upon the experience I've had working within USACAPOC headquarters and then being having the KCOM and what have you. But really, it really started off with my experience back in OEF 2010 when I collaborated as a PSYOP commander with Teresa Wolfgang. She was a CA battalion commander there. And that's when I had the aha moment that civil affairs and PSYOP needs to collaborate. And really, that's when I felt civil affairs is a strong, in the influence realm, civil affairs is much needed. And from there, I feel blessed to be the USACAPOC commanding general. And now that I am really a strong advocate of civil affairs and the force and the capability, I thank you for inviting me to be the keynote speaker. But for one, being a consumer of the information and the great dialogue that has occurred so far. And so I would really love to take part in this, even if I'm not a speaker, but I would love to receive invitation to take part in future roundtables and other events that you have. It really has been refreshing, and I thank you very much for everything that you all do here in the association. It's inspiring reading your papers and knowing how involved the professionals in the civil affairs regiment is inside and outside of the force. Soldier for life, or civil affairs professional for life, you all are really impressive. So thank you very much for the invitation, and I'll remain on the entire this evening too as well. So But that's my closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And so I will make sure we get on your calendar for our symposium in the fall, which will be held out in California. So there's your sneak peek for the announcement that's coming up this evening. But thank you again for making the time today, especially the extra time that you've added on to the end of here. And thank you for all the panelists this morning. At this point, this is the close to our morning session. We will be back on at 1800 Eastern time for the evening session to say good morning to our Korean partners and also welcome in our Southcom folks. So for now, we're going to shut this down and we will be back on. I'll get this turned back on a little before 1800 Eastern. Thank you all so much for a great morning.
All right. See you soon. See you later.